I'd like to introduce you to two new friends of mine, Robert Rodat and Molly Miller. They are married and have 3 sons together. Molly is a distinguished writer and a director, principally for television. She also made these stylish masks for my partner Rachel and me. Bob is also a writer and a producer who, along with many other impressive credits, wrote the screenplay for Saving Private Ryan. At a dinner party they hosted recently, Bob and I fell into conversation about writing and revisions. So, in preparation for this segment, I wrote to him with a few questions. He wrote back immediately with some very interesting answers. For me, he writes, a draft is one cycle in which I write the piece from start to finish, print it out, make a cup of coffee, shut my office door, and slowly read the entire work from start to finish. Then sit back at my keyboard and start over again from the beginning. With Saving Private Ryan, I did that 7 times before I ever sent it out for anyone else to read. Molly sent me this picture of just the official drafts of Bob's screenplay to Saving Private Ryan, piled up a few feet high in their son's 4th grade classroom so that the students could see what real work looks like. Molly said the kids were amazed. To them, the final draft is the first draft, is the only draft, is the thing you complete the night before it's due. In a previous interlude, we looked at some manuscripts by Brahms and Mozart, especially at places where they had made revisions. And at that time, I promised we'd look at a very interesting work by Beethoven. But before we do that, I want to look at a manuscript of another giant. This is a facsimile of a manuscript by Bach. Looks like the product of a well-ordered mind, doesn't it? It's from the B minor Mass. It's clear from this manuscript that Bach took great pains to make this fair copy, his final copy, beautiful and supremely legible. But that doesn't mean he didn't make revisions. Here he crossed out a full bar. And look at all those carefully made cross hatches. He took considerable care even with the crossing out. Here he made a significant change to the choral writing, with more of those crosshatches, but it ended up looking too messy for his standards, so he wrote out just the tenor line again in his ultra-clear hand in the margin. Now I want to invite into the conversation the Boston Landmarks Orchestra's principal cellist, Aron Zelkowicz. Hello, Aron.
Hi, Chris. It's good to be with you, and I'm looking forward to this collaboration.
You and I are about to explore together one of the great chamber works by Beethoven. But when we started talking about the revisions in this piece, you thought of another interesting case.
That's right. When I think of composers revising their works, I can't help but think of Mozart. In one of your previous interlude videos, Chris, you mentioned how Mozart was able to create an entire work in his head before even setting it down on paper. There is relatively little record of him working out his ideas before they took their final shape. Of course, we all know this about Mozart because it was so memorably dramatized in the film Amadeus. As a cellist, I'm particularly fond of Mozart's last 3 string quartets, with their soloistic, juicy cello parts, which he wrote for his patron, Friedrich Wilhelm II, who was the King of Prussia and a very good amateur cellist, presumably in his spare time. If one looks at the manuscript scores for the quartets, they are typically immaculate, without revision. However, there is one fascinating example in the D major quartet, Koelschel 575. Here we have the beginning of the 4th and final movement, and we can see that it is a direct continuation of the first 3 movements, which have all been copied cleanly into the manuscript, almost without a single mistake. Mozart doesn't even bother to start a new page. He continues immediately below the end of the previous movement. He goes so far as to write a complete 8-bar rondo theme for the first violin. Not bad. But then he discards that completely and writes out a completely new theme which bears no similarities to the first one other than the key of D major. The contour, the shape is different. It starts on a downbeat instead of a pickup. And it's just superior in every way, and I'm not just saying that because he now gives the theme to the cello. And from that point forward, he creates an entirely new finale, a movement of joyful charm that milks and develops this theme for everything that it's worth. It's as if, after leaving the house, bags packed, he decides to change his itinerary completely, a mile down the road, and yet his vacation goes as smoothly as if he had planned it the whole time. It really doesn't leave the impression that he experienced any self-doubt whatsoever.
Not that making revisions is necessarily an indicator of self-doubt, or is it? Okay, here we go now, the main event. This is the first page of the manuscript to Beethoven's great A major cello sonata. Compared with the orderly look of Bach, with his even hand and straight bar lines, it's not a model of neatness. Clearly, Beethoven had second thoughts about the tempo marking in the upper left-hand quarter, for instance. But no matter, the music is exquisite. Here's what the beginning of that great work sounds like. Just below where we stopped, you can see some scribbling out. One of the reasons this work is considered a landmark Beethoven work is because it's the first cello sonata in history in which a fully balanced functional relationship between the two instruments is achieved. Sometimes Beethoven here seems undecided about which instrument to give his primary material to.
If we look back to Beethoven's first two Opus 5 cello sonatas, they were published with the title Sonatas for Pianoforte with Cello Obbligato. It may seem trivial to prioritize one instrument over another based on which gets mentioned first in the title, like names in a law firm, but clearly there is some significance to this work, the Opus 69, being officially titled A Sonata for First Cello and then Piano. Some of you may be old enough to remember those commercials for Kraft macaroni and cheese, where the little girl thinks the cheese is so much more important than the noodles, she petitions Kraft to change the name of their product.
The Kraft Company's never gonna change their macaroni and cheese to cheese and macaroni. They don't have to. I started my own company, Katie's Cheese and Macaroni. Yep, and it's free or cheesy. Taste it. I thought so.
Kraft Cheese and Macaroni, the cheesiest.
In the case of this sonata, it may have been Kraft who did the petitioning, since the cellist who premiered the work was the Austrian cellist Nicholas Kraft. Cellists may be more familiar with the name of his father, Antonin Kraft, who was the dedicatee of Haydn's D major cello concerto.
As we get deeper into the manuscript, it looks as though old Ludwig was second-guessing himself, and then second-guessing his second guesses. It's not easy to read, but still possible here. For you musicians, the fourth bar here is the first ending of the exposition, and the beginning of the second line is the beginning of the development.
Yes, the famous development where Beethoven quotes from another one of Bach's great sacred works, the St. John's Passion, and this is the aria Es ist vollbracht. If we recall the opening of our Beethoven theme, we have an ascending three-note motif followed by a descent. And if we change just that first note to one of approaching above rather than from below, it gives this little motif so much more pathos. And this is how we hear it in the Bach as played by a precursor to the cello, the viola da gamba. And to my ears, it is the same melody that we hear in another famous Baroque work, the Adagio in G minor by Tommaso Albinoni. The A major cello sonata is a sunny work overall, brimming with vitality and even an outburst of C major toward the end. The coda of the finale contains a little mini apotheosis reminiscent of the Pastoral Symphony that was written around the same time. The fact that this first movement development contains such turmoil both in the music and the physical manuscript indicates Beethoven's desire to go deeper, to create a work of different shadings and facets, by turns happy and then stormy, tragic, and ultimately triumphant. So, Chris, let's play the development, shall we?
Now turn the page. Oi! How did his publisher or copyist even read this? You can see at the bottom even Beethoven assumed it was unreadable because he started just writing in the note names. Still, it's amazing music and sounds perfect when we hear it. Okay, Aron, let's tackle this page. Wow. And the moral of the story? If you find that you're trashing more than you're saving, you might be onto something. Or at the very least, you're certainly in good company.